shower, but for the bulk of the UK it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around and temperatures doing quite well in the sunshine, particularly across England and Wales, reaching the mid-locally upper teens in Celsius during the afternoon, up to 16 or 17 Celsius down towards the southeast, but feeling cooler down those North Sea coasts with that brisk north to northwesterly wind. So to end the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the north of the UK, some patchy cloud across the east and southeast of Scotland, with the best of the sunshine here towards the north and west of the country. Quite a bit of sunshine too across Northern Ireland, with some patchy cloud out across some western spots. But as we run into England and Wales, it's here we'll see the best of the evening sunshine, almost wall-to-wall sunshine here. And at this stage, temperatures holding up quite well at 14 or 15 Celsius in some spots, so fairly mild here to end the day. As we go into the evening then, the cloud will tend to melt away, certainly across those northern and eastern spots of the UK. Plenty of clear weather then developing into the early hours of Monday. But notice up towards the north and northwest here we'll see thickening cloud and a bit of a breeze developing too, bringing some patchy rain in across the far north and west of Scotland and locally in across some western parts of Northern Ireland. A touch of frost in the south, temperatures could get down to -2 to -4 Celsius here with a patchy frost, whereas towards the northwest there staying milder with that cloud, breeze and a bit of patchy rain too. So into Monday then, we hold on to cloud towards the far north and northwest of the UK, bringing further bits of patchy rain at times, but for the bulk of the UK it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around, the best of the sunshine across England and Wales, pretty much wall-to-wall sunshine here, and those temperatures doing pretty well too in the south, especially up to 16 or 17 Celsius, perhaps 18 towards the far northeast locally.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag and not one, but two sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good morning. We have entered British summertime as the clocks have sprung forward overnight. As we shake off the shackles of Greenwich Mean Time, I welcome you to Sunday with Michael Portillo for 2 hours of arts, culture, current affairs and politics on this final Sunday of March. The Chancellor of the Exchequer claims to have rebalanced the national books with some promised cuts to public spending. But has a new government with a huge majority thrown away the opportunity to make radical changes, as many observers think that we are headed towards national ruin? A so-called unprecedented Iron Age hoard has been found in Melsonby in North Yorkshire. Chief Executive of Historic England, Duncan Wilson, will join me. Are climate scientists the only people qualified to talk about net zero? Stephen Webb will be here to argue for an interdisciplinary approach, highlighting that competing factors need to be balanced and political decisions need to be made. And a new Braille art installation has been unveiled at Colchester Railway Station, spelling out the city's name. A man known as the blind Braille artist Clark Reynolds will join me to discuss his art. And before all of that, your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. Prince Harry has been accused of harassment and bullying by the chair of the charity he set up in Princess Diana's honour. Dr Sophie Chandauka has claimed the Duke of trying to sabotage the organisation before sensationally quitting. Earlier on this week, she told reporters he wanted to eject her of the charity he founded in honour of his late mother through bullying and harassment. In response, we've heard from a source close to Prince Harry and other trustees who left Centre Barley in solidarity this week. They said they fully expected this publicity stunt from the doctor. They remain firm in their resignation and look forward to the adjudication of the truth. Elsewhere, the government will introduce tough new laws to clamp down on illegal working. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has today said that employers need to take action that prevents the illegal working in the first place. Companies hiring people in the gig economy will now be legally required to carry out checks confirming that anyone working in their name is eligible to work in the UK, bringing them in line with other employers. The term gig economy usually refers to short-term jobs, the most common examples including food delivery drivers and construction workers. Well, that's all ahead of the government's first international summit on people smuggling gangs, which begins in London tomorrow. Security Minister Dan Jarvis says the UK is showing leadership in tackling the issue.
For 6 years, the previous government allowed the criminal networks that smuggle people into this country to largely get away with it. We are tackling their activities by working very closely with our neighbours internationally. And that's why we are hosting the summit in London over the next couple of days, because this is a truly international challenge and the solution will have to be truly international as well. It will involve us, as we are, working very closely with the French, but with a range of other partners along the supply networks that people are trafficked along. So this is the UK showing real leadership in terms of bringing more than 40 countries from around the world together to look at what more we can do to tackle this pernicious activity.
Elsewhere, the UK government has pledged up to £10 million in life-saving aid to Myanmar after a deadly earthquake claimed more than 1,000 lives. The UN's warning a severe shortage of medical supplies is hampering the response to the deadly quake. As the search for survivors continues, 139 people are reportedly still missing across the country. More than 1,600 people were killed and thousands more injured following that 7.7 magnitude earthquake. The tremors caused destruction as far away as Thailand and China. Hundreds are believed to still be trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings. In Bangkok, a 12th body was recovered late last night from the site of a collapsed high-rise. In Myanmar, a woman was recovered alive after being trapped under the rubble for 30 hours. Now, former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says he forgives serial abuser John Smith as he repeatedly apologised to victims and told of the deep sense of personal failure he feels about the handling of the allegations. The former most senior bishop in the Church of England, who resigned in November and stepped down officially in January, said he'd not really thought it through enough when he initially declined to quit last year. The Macon report into John Smith concluded Mr Welby did not adequately follow up on reports about the Christian camp leader and barrister. It said Smith might have been brought to justice had Mr Welby formally reported allegations to police in 2013. Mr Welby initially said he would not resign over the report and remained in the post for a further 5 days before announcing he would quit. And finally, the Prince and Princess of Wales celebrate Mother Nurture on Mother's Day. The pair posted a video on their X account a short while ago marking this special occasion, along with a caption written by the princess herself, which reads, "Over the past year, nature has been our sanctuary. This Mother's Day, let us celebrate Mother Nature and recognise how our bond with the natural world can help not only nurture our inner selves, but remind us too of the role we play within the rich tapestry of life." Those are the latest headlines. For now, more from me in an hour.
Thank you very much, Tatiana Sanchez. Rachel Reeves' autumn budget was radical in that it raised taxes dramatically, but her spring statement suggests she's now a Chancellor on the defensive. With both taxes and public spending so high already and set to climb, many observers think that Britain is sliding towards ruin, or at least stagnation. Has the government already given up all idea of sweeping reform to increase our living standards and Britain's competitiveness? Joining me now is my panel, journalist and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire, and deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. Welcome to you all. Scarlett, what do you think? Do you think the government has given up all idea of radical reform?
Well, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, look at what they're doing with planning, right? I mean, planning is radical reform for growth. That they're very proud of it. They think they're going to build 1.5 million houses. They're going to let things go. I mean, you know, we know that we need desperately to get things going, and that's what they're going to do. You probably won't agree with it, but I do think that their working practices, they're going to make things much easier for workers, and that is quite radical. In education, they're going to have nurseries, they're putting in breakfast clubs. I think they are a radical. I think they are a radical government, very, very hemmed in with being given a bad hand to begin with and then it getting worse. I mean, it's very difficult being Chancellor when across the Atlantic you've got Trump about to put on tariffs and you never know what he's going to do next.
But let's look at the big numbers. I mean, basically about 300 billion, a bit more on Social Security, 200 billion, a bit more on the National Health Service, 100 billion, a bit more on servicing the debt. I mean, that's where you need radicalism. The reductions, I said wrongly a moment ago, cuts to public spending. The reductions in the growth of public spending, you know, the perhaps 5 billion in the area of Social Security, it hardly touches the rate of growth of Social Security, so that we can see we're going to spend much more, even on benefits that most of us, including the government, don't think we should be paying to people who are healthy and young and not in work. That's where we need radicalism, isn't it?
No, but actually, Michael, I think she's gone about it the wrong way. I think that if you want to deal with welfare, you don't begin by saying, let's get the bills down. You should do what the 1990s, the Blair government did, and say, how do we get people back to work? And they did it. And they did it. And to begin with, as Rachel Reeves is doing, you have to put money into it. You have to get people back into work. And getting back into work costs money. Getting somebody who hasn't worked, and we're talking mostly about the young.
They're being radical, but they're doing the wrong thing.
I think, I think they're doing it the wrong way round. And I think instead of being led by let's get people back into work, she's being led by let's cut the welfare bill, which is the wrong way round.
And she's not cutting the welfare bill, it's going up.
And getting people back into work will cut the welfare bill. That's the only way to do it. But that's what you have to be thinking about, is how do I get people back into work? Not, you know, how do I stop people taking benefits?
Fraser.
Well, it's interesting. The welfare issue is something that Rachel Reeves' hand has been forced on. I don't think they came into government wanting to particularly reform welfare, especially not in this way. It seems to be in response to the Office for Budget Responsibilities, you know, cutting of the fiscal headroom. I mean, it was interesting that I think they demanded an extra 500 million worth of cuts, and that's What's sad is, I think Scarlett's right, you know, you need to start with the idea that you have these reforms, you want to achieve a certain end, get people into work, but really it's going to be cutting welfare across the board, which I think is a bit of a problem. If people deserve welfare, then it shouldn't be cut, but lots of people clearly don't deserve it, or really we're using it to mask the unemployment problem that we have.
Come to the general point about whether the government, with a huge majority, newly elected, has given up the opportunity to be radical.
I think it has, and I think it's doing some good work on planning, but I think actually we might discover that it's not as radical as it needs to be. If you look at how little growth the OBR says it's going to produce, if we can trust them, that's another question. One of the other key areas that's holding back growth is energy, and you could say the government's being radical, but then in totally the wrong direction. We have the highest energy costs in the developed world. That's a huge problem for industry. It's leading to deindustrialisation, factories shutting down. All kinds of industries are suffering under that. What's the Labour policy? Doubling down on net zero, increasing energy costs. So that's a real danger there. That could unlock serious growth. We produce 20% less energy than we did in the 2000s. That's a catastrophe that's not being talked about.
Candice, what's your view of this? Is the government being radical? I mean, it looks as though we're going to end the Parliament with taxes higher than when we started, public spending higher than when we started. Is that a good platform on which to go to the country?
No, I don't think so. I think you're sort of ending up in the worst of both worlds. And, you know, just from a personal perspective, people I speak to in their mid to late 30s, there's such a sense of malaise. A real sense of economic malaise. People feel like my life isn't going to get better. I can't aspire to anything. People feel very, very, very financially pressured, especially in terms of interest rates, which I know that Rachel Reeves doesn't have control over, but I think some of what they're doing feeds into that. And, you know, there's nothing that the government can really do, or Rachel Reeves can do, because she's made herself such a prisoner to events.
Well, I wonder about that. I think normally if we were talking, and I was talking about radicalism, lots of viewers wouldn't understand what we were talking about. But we have the example of Trump. So we can actually see what radicalism is. It's somebody coming in and really wanting to do everything differently and saying, I've got 4 years and I'm going to change everything that I can. We may like some of this, we may not, but at least we can see what radicalism really looks like. I put it to you, it doesn't look like this Labour government.
No, they're confused. I think that you're so right. With welfare reform, they had such a chance to really do something once in a generation, but instead they've chosen to make what most people think is quite a modest cut, whilst expending huge political capital amongst their base, amongst the Labour base, for instance. And then those on the right who are calling for bolder reforms are also critical of it. So you have to choose, OK? It's OK, make the bold decisions, sort of risk annoying people, but you know you've made change for the good. But they don't do that. They don't do that at all. It's almost like they want it both ways. Or maybe it's just that they're confused. And like I said, prisoner to events, she doesn't really have many moves to make on the chessboard because of the position she put herself in economically with such very, very thin margins to operate.
Scarlett, your fellow panellists are not impressed at the moment. And you raised Tony Blair earlier. Tony Blair, you know, famously said after his first term, what I really regret is that I didn't use that huge majority that I had, that I wasn't radical from the beginning, when I had all that goodwill. That's the example of Tony Blair that this government ought to be looking at.
Yeah, the problem is that Candice is right, is that Rachel Reeves locked herself in. The OBR, which I think I'm about to agree with Fraser. I mean, you know, the OBR are just a bunch of economists, right, who say this is going to happen. Well, since when do economists get it right? The OBR is forever revising its forecast. So she's locked into that. She's locked into her fiscal rules, which is about, you know, she says we only borrow to invest. Well, I think investing is rather broader than what she says. And so when you're that locked in, and then you have Trump in the White House and the war in Ukraine, and then, you know, the other thing that she's locked into is getting defence spending up. I think it's very, very tough. It's very easy for you to talk radical, but actually radical costs money. Well, I mean, unless you're going to do what Trump does and basically get rid of the whole civil service, which I'm very glad they're not going to do. But even then, they're going to do it properly. I mean, you might want it more radically, but actually I think it's great they're doing it softly.
Fraser, the civil service, as an example, I mean, more than 100,000 more civil servants than there were at the beginning of COVID. I mean, just take it back to where we were a few years ago? Is that so difficult?
Yeah, and public sector productivity is completely stagnant. That's one of the things that seems to be holding the economy back. I mean, just on the point of the OBR, it's worth saying that their forecasts are out by an average of 15% of GDP. So that's 2 whole NHS budgets that the forecasts are out. So this is a crazy way to make economic policy. It just and to lock yourself into that, we need to get rid of the fiscal rules are a fiction. The predictions are a fiction, and a lot of this just really stems from the lack of growth. Really, if there were more growth, we'd have more money to spend. Everyone would be happy, hopefully. But yeah, just having to make all kinds of choices because the growth isn't coming.
Panel, unfortunately, we're out of time, but luckily you're going to return because Candace Holdsworth, Scarlett Maguire, and Fraser Myers will be here at noon to discuss free speech in public institutions following the decision to fine the University of Sussex for failing to protect its Professor of Philosophy, Kathleen Stock, from being cancelled. Coming up before that, an unprecedented Iron Age hoard has been found in North Yorkshire, and the Chief Executive of Historic England, Duncan Wilson, will be here. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. An allegedly unprecedented Iron Age hoard has been found in North Yorkshire. The Melsonby hoard has been described as one of the largest and most important Iron Age finds in the United Kingdom. It was discovered in a field by a metal detectorist called Peter Heads, and it was excavated with the help of Historic England and Durham University. The archaeological deposit of more than 800 items offers a rare insight into Iron Age life around 2,000 years ago. Joining me now is the Chief Executive of Historic England, Duncan Wilson.
Hi.
Good to see you, Duncan. So 2,000 years ago, this is presumably around the time that the Romans arrived in Britain then. Did these people, do we think, already have contact with the Romans?
Oh, yes. There was lots of... Well, of course, Julius came earlier and went. But in AD 43, the Romans came for good. But before that, there were client kingdoms and client kings and client queens operating with strong links with Roman trade links, political links. So that there was a depth of contact before the invasion.
Very interesting. Have we any idea what the Romans thought of our Iron Age Britons? I mean, would they have thought them very primitive or not?
Well, there are literary references to how cold it was and how foggy it was. But actually, when the Romans did arrive, there was a lot of integration. And the Roman gods and Celtic gods merged into one in some cases, and they kept on with the Celtic gods. So there was a degree of assimilation which indicates they weren't, they didn't despise the culture.
So we're seeing on the screen now some of the elements of the hoard. So there's about 800 items that have been discovered. Here we're seeing jewellery and household items and things like that. But I think very interesting, some of the things that have been discovered have to do with transport. We've found quite a lot of wagons, haven't we, and wheels. Now, is this quite unusual?
It is, and, we don't know, because we've got the iron tyres but not the wheels and the vehicles, whether these were wagons or chariots or both. But to the extent that some of them are almost certainly wagons, then that is a first for Iron Age Britain. So, it's very interesting. And to find this quantity of objects together is really unusual.
Would you like to speculate on why so many objects have been found in one place? This was a deliberate dumping or deposit or something.
Well, it could be that they are the remains of funeral pyres. There have been no human remains found with them, but we know that with, one of the Iron Age rituals was to deface and burn objects which would then be presumably taken to the afterlife. And this could be representative of clearing up after that. It was at the side of the road leading up to the enormous Iron Age hill fort of Stannick, and maybe it's something like that. I like to think of it as potentially the Appian Way in Rome, where the tombs lined the road on the way into the city, but that's a bit fanciful.
And one of the things we can deduce from this is wealth, can we not?
Absolutely.
I mean, these people have jewellery, they have sophisticated household items, and they have these vehicles which are pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly.
These were rich people.
They were, and the quality of the objects, the horse bits are quite oversized compared to what we normally find, and they are embossed with coral and enamel, and that, again, is unusual and indicative of wealth and trade links as far as the Mediterranean.
Tell me about what may happen to the hoard. So, first of all, it was found by a detectorist. That's fairly common, is it, that a detectorist, a fellow out there with a metal detector or a lady, comes across something, thinks it's interesting, does the civic duty by reporting it, and then it turns to institutions like the University of Durham and so on for an excavation. But what next? Is this hoard protected?
Well, it is declarable under the Portable Antiquities Scheme, but that does require, as you indicate, that the detectorist has to make contact when they've found something. This detectorist was very responsible, and there happened to be archaeologists working nearby, so the contact was made, and the archaeologist said, please don't dig anything more up. We will come and do it in a controlled way and find out about the context. And I think it's a really good indication of how well the Portable Antiquities Scheme works.
Does the detectorist get a reward?
Yes. And probably shares it with the landowner, depending on the conditions under which they were on the land. So there's an incentive to do it, but also I think a lot of detectorists want the kudos of feeling something they found is in this case, the Yorkshire Museum, we hope, because they're raising money to...
Yeah, tell me a bit more about that, we hope.
Well,
what has to happen?
They have to raise £250,000 or so, I believe, to purchase the hoard through the Portable Antiquities Scheme. And we very much hope they will be able to do that, so it'll be on view for the people of Yorkshire.
You were an archaeologist in your time.
I was, yes.
So tell me about your first dig. Tell me why it's exciting to be on a dig, assuming it is.
Well, it is. Well, for a start, you're part of a team.
Yeah.
And as a 17-year-old boy, I was, really excited to be with 20, 30-year-old archaeologists and learning about it. It was in Sherborne, in the chapter house next to the Abbey, and we excavated a huge medieval tiled pavement with burials. It was just so exciting to see it appearing out of the ground and the stories it told.
I don't know how that find would compare with this find that we're talking about in North Yorkshire, but describe what you think the excitement must be amongst the team there as all of this has come out of the ground.
Well, I think to find something on this scale, I mean, normally you find 1 or 2 objects, 800 objects. And the joy of archaeology is the interpretation is pretty free-form. You can invent all sorts of theories, test them, find out which ones work. But that kind of academic speculation is part of the joy of archaeology. But actually finding the real thing in the ground is, I think, almost... I defy anybody not to be excited by that.
Are we, to some extent, reappraising the Iron Age? I asked you the question earlier on about, whether the Romans thought they were pretty unsophisticated. But I'm quite struck that that is a civilization which may have had some contact with the Romans by then, but it's obviously developed sui generis. It's developed on its own, and it's come up with some pretty good objects.
Absolutely. I don't think we want to make the mistake of assuming that it all came from Rome and was adopted. This is a rich culture, a sophisticated culture that can build huge hill forts and towns. And create wonderful objects with Celtic decoration. And, that is not coming from Rome, but there are links to Rome.
And the cleverest of these people, the indigenous Britons, sort of did deals with the Romans when they arrived. Yes. And they continued to be a sort of aristocracy that was tolerated by the Romans and cooperated with the Romans.
Absolutely. And sometimes it went wrong, as in the case of Boudica.
Yes.
She was a client queen, and then... because of various injustices, she led a rebellion which nearly toppled the Romans in Britain.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. So all you detectorists out there, take heart. You can make tremendous discoveries. Thank you very much indeed, Duncan Wilson. Coming up, are climate scientists best placed to talk about net zero? I'll be discussing that with Policy Exchange's Stephen Webb. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Withensea. It's an East Yorkshire seaside town that's been here for centuries. Once a bustling coastal resort, now only its pier towers remain. And like many British seaside destinations, it's seen a drop in holiday makers.
Gone are the days when we had packed beaches. The area has changed and, it just needs a little bit more, so there's something to do for people.
Since they pulled the railway, that was a death of witnesses sort of thing. Slowly it's died to what it is now. About the next thing, I guess, it'll go in the sea.
Yeah, I think it's a typical English seaside town, and sometimes they don't move with the times, do they?
And it hasn't changed a lot since, when I come. But still people here, still people come.
Plans for a new pier were scrapped in 2023 due to funding issues. Now, with price hikes brought on by Labour's autumn budget, business owners are feeling the pinch. Annette Bagley owns the Rosy Leaf Cafe, and she's been forced to put up her prices.
It's been a bit hard because the wages have gone up, national insurance has gone up, so everything is going up. My costs for just running the place, the coffee's gone up, chocolate's gone up, everything really has just gone up, and I'm afraid I've had to pass that on to customers by putting my prices up a little bit.
East Riding Council has schemes in place to boost the economy.
And we're just trying to make the town better in lots of different ways. We also have a big voluntary group called Town Smart, and there's a great team of volunteers, and we're out there litter picking, cleaning, painting, and we're also going to sort of see if we can create a business collective and a business group as we go forwards to help local businesses.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Are climate scientists the only people qualified to talk about net zero? Should the issue instead be tackled by people with a variety of backgrounds and approaches, not exclusively limited to science? Stephen Webb suggests that politicians, administrators, and indeed the general public need to recover their self-confidence and push back on claims that climate policy is an area that should be uniquely governed by science. And he emphasises that there are political choices to be made. Stephen Webb, Head of Government Reform and Home Affairs at Policy Exchange, joins me now. Welcome to the programme. In an article you wrote recently, you make a comparison with the way that COVID policy developed. And I must say, I was very struck at the time that politicians were saying the science must rule. You were in the Treasury, I was in the Treasury. We had learned and we had practiced that you had to balance scientific evidence against other considerations, like, for example, the needs of the economy. The needs of the economy are a perfectly legitimate thing to weigh in the balance. That didn't seem to happen under COVID, and I think your thesis is that it's not happening in the proper way when we consider net zero.
I think that's right. I think this idea of settled science, following the science, is something that was very much being pressed in COVID and has been pressed for a long time on the climate science. And sometimes it's the scientists themselves who make this point. Sometimes it's the kind of popularisers and the and lobby groups and special interests. But they're very rarely held back when people make extravagant claims to say that not just the fact of climate change, but the series of measures that we need to take to deliver net zero in the UK by 2050 is absolutely required by the science. I think it's an illegitimate use of science. And I think in the article, I look at a series of questions that need to be asked. The first one is about the underlying science. You know, does man-made carbon dioxide, in the long run, is it likely to increase global warming? You know, most people think that's absolutely the case among scientists. Then there's the modelling, which I think people with our background can legitimately kick the tyres on and say, well, does it seem to make sense from what's happened in the past? Is it being borne out now? Then thirdly is, if that modelling is true, what's the impact going to be, positive and negative? And that really starts becoming enormously complicated because you've got the rainfall, extreme weather events, crop events, some of which are positive, some of which are negative, balancing all these out, all the sort of feedback loops. And then the final one is, given this possible effect, what policy measures should be taken? And that's really where you get into the space of political decisions, because it's about economic growth against the climate. But economic growth isn't just a sort of a question of money. It's about people's lives in other areas. If we spend a huge amount on climate change and mitigation now, there's a whole load of other things we can't spend on the NHS or international aid or whatever, which are going to have dramatic effects on people's lives as well. And I think really there's a level there of intergenerational fairness. And I don't see that anybody other than politicians can actually ultimately make that choice. And I think it's part of a general phenomenon that we've got into where politicians have been giving away power to laws, to arm's length bodies, to the courts. And as I said in earlier pieces for Policy Exchange, you can give away you can give away power, but you can't ultimately give away the accountability. When things go wrong, as a politician, you will still be blamed for it.
I'm very glad you said that at the end. I mean, I think this is one of my hobby horses. I do not understand a generation of politicians that actually don't seem to want to make decisions, that are quite happy constantly actually to invent new bodies that are going to take the decisions on their behalf. So these bodies will probably be more popular than the politicians simply because they're not politicians, but they are certainly not accountable, and we don't know what prejudices they may exercise. But politicians really seem to have gone off the idea of making decisions. When I was there, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be held accountable and make a difference. It's strange, isn't it?
Absolutely. And off this topic, a classic example of this is the Bank of England that was given independence. The Bank of England was given full independence and all the levers it needed to influence inflation policy and was given an inflation target. When a couple of years ago it dramatically missed it, the polling suggested that the public actually blamed the government. So it's a good example. Even if you're really, really strict about taking the decisions away from yourselves and it goes wrong, as a politician, you won't escape the blame. So there is an argument to say you might as well make the decision yourself.
I mean, just going back to COVID for a moment, we were used to making assessments, even assessments that put a value on human life. Now, popularly, people will say, oh, you can't put a value on human life. I'm afraid you have to, because there are other damages that can occur to the economy. And it was extraordinary to me that as we proceeded into the COVID pandemic, nobody was saying, well, this is going to save so many lives and the value of those lives saved is X, but it's going to cost us 4X or 10X or whatever it might have been. And the same you're saying now is really happening with the net zero debate. We've allowed a group of scientists and we've allowed politicians to say, let's follow the science, which has pushed us towards a fairly extreme interpretation of how quickly we have to achieve net zero. And the political consequences was scarcely considered. We know that back in the days of Theresa May, the legislation went through scarcely with debate and certainly without a controversial division in the House of Commons. Now seems extraordinary.
So you're right, there were really only a couple of MPs who expressed any concerns at all. I mean, one of whom, interestingly, was Kemi Badenoch, who did ask some of the questions about whether we really understood what the cost of all this was going to be. And of course, given, as people rightly point out, this is a global phenomenon, you've also got the challenge that if we're the only ones doing it, how much difference is this going to make? There was a big advertisement that Modi in India was running, sort of congratulating the Indian mining industry for reaching 1 billion tonnes of coal extraction. So, clearly in China and India, there's vast expansion on the coal side. So it's something that the risk is that we incur an enormous amount of cost that has impact on people's lives in this country for what might be relatively minor effects globally.
I mean, just to put that in context, orders of magnitude, we used to produce until, relatively recently, 100 million tonnes of coal. I think the United States currently might produce about 400 million tonnes, down from 1 billion. India's at 1 billion. China at 5 billion tonnes of coal. I mean, what we have done, I commend Britain on what it's done. Of course, people were very angry about closing the coal mines. I understand that, but it's happened and it's made a difference. But it hasn't made a difference globally, has it? And these are the sorts of sums, are they not? These are the sorts of balances that you ought to be considering.
Absolutely. And I think going back to the COVID one was another interesting example of that, but that not only did we not do the sums at the time, but there was a potential scenario where the lockdown and the measures we took might have saved quite a lot of lives in the short term, but might have had a greater impact in the longer term. Some of the sort of comparisons of us with other countries that didn't do lockdowns, like Sweden, suggest that maybe it didn't really make much difference either way. So we've hit the economy with sort of £400 billion of costs in the COVID period, and it's not really clear what we got for it. Now, these were difficult decisions at the time, but the main point, I think, is that there too there was almost a mobbing effect on politicians to say you really can't push back on this. There's only one scientific answer to this. And we had, until quite recently, we had bodies like the Royal Society that were very careful about not getting involved in debates on one side. In nullius verba, was take no one's word for it, was their position. More recently, I think a lot of these bodies have taken clear positions on what they consider to be the settled science, and that has certain risks, I feel.
Yeah. Settled science is not a term I'm very comfortable with at all. Thank you very much, Stephen Webb. As Christians across the world observe Lent, we're bringing you daily reflections from ministers around the United Kingdom. And here is today's message.
The GB News Daily Reflection.
My mum is amazing. Everyone says that, and they should. But my dad left when I was very young, just after my sister was born, and my mum raised the two of us on her own. She made sure that we were safe, loved, well-educated, and had opportunities to make something of our lives. Often that meant she had to make sacrifices so that we would be provided for and have those opportunities. Motherhood isn't easy. In the Christian tradition, we remember that Mary was there at Jesus' crucifixion, seeing her own son put to death in front of her, a moment of unimaginable suffering for any parent, for any mum. And we also remember that God describes himself using maternal language. He loves us like a mother hen with her chicks, like a woman who could never forget the child she nursed. When we think of a mother's love, we get a glimpse into the love of God. Mother's Day is complicated for lots of people, but if you can, phone your mum, because perhaps your mum's love was the first window that you got into the love of God.
That was the daily reflection during Lent. Coming up, this year is both the 200th anniversary of Braille as well as of modern passenger railways. Artist Clark Reynolds has a new Braille artwork exhibited at Colchester Station. He'll join me after this coming break. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We continue to stay unsettled across central and eastern parts of the Mediterranean with further heavy showers and thunderstorms, some localised flooding possible. Through Monday, we can see across much of Greece into Italy those heavy downpours continuing, some brisk winds, feeling quite cold too, but drier further west into Spain and Portugal, sunny spells before heading over to Madeira where there'll be some showers here, and largely dry across the Canary Islands. Over the next few days it stays fairly similar, temperatures in the sunshine reaching the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. High pressure starting to build in, so plenty of dry weather to come across the country. It's still fairly windy, particularly across central and northern parts of the UK. A sunny start to the day, still some showers across northern Scotland, but for most of the dry day to come, plenty of sunny spells, though pretty windy across northern England, eastern parts of northern England as well, eastern Scotland, a northerly breeze here, some large waves along the coast, but winds light further west, and with plenty of sunshine it will feel pleasant out there. Temperatures reaching around 15 or 16 Celsius above average for the time of year, just a little chilly along those eastern coasts in that wind. As we head through into this evening time, some thicker cloud will start to approach parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but for most it's a dry end to the day, plenty of evening sunshine and temperatures still in double figures in places, but starting to feel chilly as the sun drops in the sky. Plenty of dry weather across Northern Ireland, Northern England as well, breeze starting to ease as well. The rest of England and Wales clearing skies to end the day and temperatures around 13 Celsius. Into the evening time, thicker cloud could give a few splashes of rain across Northern Ireland into the Western Isles as we head into the early hours. Otherwise, it's dry for many with clear skies, and that will allow temperatures to drop away. And with light winds, we could see some mist and fog patches forming in places too. Single-figure temperatures down to 3 or 4 in the towns and cities, perhaps a little lower than this in the countryside. So any early frost and fog quickly clearing, and then England and Wales, plenty of sunshine to come. Just still some weather fronts through the Irish Sea up into Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, thick enough for some cloud and outbreaks of patchy rain. Otherwise, it's plenty of dry weather around, unbroken sunshine for parts of England and Wales, and with light winds feeling pleasant, temperatures 17 or 18 Celsius, a little cooler under the cloud further north. See you soon.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth,
it's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. A new Braille art installation has been unveiled at Colchester railway station, spelling out the city's name. Blind and partially sighted artists have come together to create the blue and white tactile plaque. My next guest, known as the blind Braille artist, was born partially sighted in one eye and is now registered as severely sighted with only 5% vision. Clark Reynolds joins me now. Clark, welcome to the programme, and you have completely outdone me in the dress department, so let's begin with that.
Well...
looks like you're wearing Braille on your yellow overalls, but describe that to me. Is it your design?
It is the design. So the idea is, you know, just like your characters, you know, comic character, I've created my persona as Mr. Dot. So I go into schools just like this, up and down the country, not just as Mr. Dot, but also teaching them Braille through art. And what's really important is those youngsters, next generation, know about sight loss through the use of Mr. Dot and Braille. And in the past 2 years, over 15,000 children up and down the country. And last year, I was a finalist for the National Diversity Awards for Positive Disability Role Model of the Year.
Oh, that is fantastic. Maybe discuss your own history. So you began to lose the sight in one eye when you were a child. When did you begin to learn Braille?
So, you know, back in the 80s, sight loss wasn't talked about. You know, I was in the back of the classroom, blind in one eye, had the patches. Always wanted to be an artist, you know, from day dot, as they say. And I did a degree in model making because I thought I'd get a skill base behind me because then I could do all the crazy stuff later. And I became a dental model maker. And around about 12 years ago, I noticed a dark shadow in my right eye, or left eye. Right, left and right is not very good for me. That was it. It was like, how do I want to be the artist I want to be as a 6-year-old? So about 6 years ago, my friend gave me a Perkins typewriter. Now, have you ever come across one of those before?
No, tell me about it.
So this machine has not changed since the 1950s. It's like an organ with 6 keys, because Braille is a mathematical language. So when you ever have a play on one, you can learn it really quickly. So I learnt Braille in 3 weeks because I saw it as a pattern.
How extraordinary. You learnt it in 3 weeks?
Yeah, because I didn't see it as a letter. You know, because as an artist, my brain is geared to, like, wired to patterns. So after 3 weeks, I was like, oh, why can't this be an art form? You know, just like a typewriter used as a letter, I can use a dot, and for me, the dot has more power.
Just lift this item up here and just hold it dead in front of you. That's absolutely beautiful. So describe... Well, I mean, it's a lovely thing. It's brightly coloured, and you've just told me before we came on air that spells love in Braille, yes?
It does.
Take me through it then.
So the idea is iconic print, 1970s, LOVE. I've just Brailleised it. And then by giving it another colour, if I told everyone that this one is called bubblegum, I'm sure all at a certain age group would know a certain bubblegum brand that this inspired me. So the idea is I'm going to do loads of these, and just by changing that word, we'll have the colours. So I see colours through words as a blind person now.
Yes. Now, this is a very tactile piece.
Yes, you can touch it,
in other words, yes, this is all in high relief, so my fingers are tracing this. So relate this now to what you've done at Colchester railway station.
So at Colchester railway station, for the Paddington Trust, again, another amazing charity for the visually impaired, they commissioned me to create a Braille sign. But also, Braille is 200 years old, and Rail is 200 years old, and obviously you love your railway.
The Stockton and Darlington Railway is 200 years this old. They're just 200 years old this year, on the 27th of September.
So I created a sign that read Braille rail. So you had the rail in English, and then you had the BLE in Braille, and it was a great sign. And then underneath, I created a Colchester sign. And I looked at the heritage one as well. So I looked at the shapes and kind of nodded it back to like 200 years old. And it looks like it's always been there. It's in the reception in Colchester, and it's always been there. It feels like it anyway.
That's fabulous. Now, generally speaking, we don't touch art, but presumably you want people to come up and touch this, do you?
All my art's there to touch, but because it's because it's signage, you know, my Braille typography, we're going to call it, people don't realise it, like it's there, so they don't really go by it and touch it unless they think, oh, what's that different? So there's usually big signs saying you must touch the artwork, which I love. You know, most galleries now. I mean, you've been to a few.
You must touch the artwork.
You must touch the artwork. You've got the big barriers round, and but yeah, the beauty of it is, you know, if you don't know Braille, the idea of touching artwork just gives you another sense, you know, and then it has conversations with the art piece.
Let me make another parallel for you here. I've been very struck, you know, that the railways, the basic technology has not changed in 200 years. You've got two pieces of metal 4 foot 8.5 inches apart. That was the case at Stockton and Darlington in 1825. It's the case today. Braille has not changed much either, has it, in 200 years? So this is brilliant. Some pre-Victorian, well, Braille, hit upon a scheme which has not been modified since. Braille works for you, does it? Braille works for blind people?
It works for blind people, but unfortunately, because of technology, a lot of blind people have become quite lazy, if that makes sense, because Braille is not where it should be. You know, there should be Braille on every toilet. And not up here. I don't know who does this to open the door. It should be by the handle. There should be Braille menus. There should be Braille signage on the train station. And did you know there's no Braille on the Underground whatsoever?
Yeah, that is extraordinary. Because, I mean, so many changes have been made to help people with special needs, but apparently Braille has not been spread around in the way that it should have been.
And as an artist, the idea of bringing Braille to the masses, you know, and not just for that, I mean, this leads perfectly onto the project I'm doing now. The idea that it's, when you have a Braille book for a child, for a VI child, it's a specialised book and only VI children will get them. I'm quite emotional because a year in the planning, my first ever children's book is coming out in 6 weeks' time.
And you are on the cover, there we are.
Oh, there you go, Mr. Dot. But the thing is, in this book, I've designed it in a way that this will sit on any bookshelf in any major bookstore around the country, and when a child picks this up and takes this home, when they open it, it will all be in Braille as well. So it's not like Braille for VI children, this is Braille for the masses.
Yes.
And that's what my art's about.
That's absolutely brilliant. You were talking about watching my railway journeys. So tell me a bit about that.
Oh, I mean, me and my partner, Anita, it's one of our favourite shows. I think you're season 8 now, cross-continental. And what I love about how you describe it, I don't need all the description because your enthusiasm, your voice adds gravitas to where you're going. I'm sure the beautiful scenes, we've just done Switzerland this week, and I can imagine all those mountains and those lakes.
That's obviously amazingly encouraging to me. I actually find it quite difficult to be observant, and I have to keep reminding myself that I need to look at things carefully, I need to describe them, partly because some people won't be able to see them, but also that some people won't be able to come here and enjoy them because they're elderly or they're infirm or whatever. So it's a big responsibility. So you're having success now. It's been quite a turnaround in your life there, hasn't it?
It has, and obviously we just talked to your first guest about the welfare. I don't want to get too political, but I'm terrified. I'm literally terrified. In a year's time, I will lose a chunk of money. I can't get access to work. The access to work system is broken, you know, and so I'm going to be more than an artist. I'm going to be the author. I'm going to be the keynote speaker. I'm going to be the advocate for blind children. So when they grow up, obviously, whatever government we've got in 20 years' time, there's a world for them to do whatever they want, you know, and that's what Mr. Dot is about. You know, Mr. Dot can be anything it wants.
Clark, I have to stop you there. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I have to stop you simply because that concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. We're going to be discussing free speech in public institutions. We're going to be discussing J.D. Vance's visit to Greenland. Some very interesting remarks were made during the sentencing of 2 RAF engineers who stole a statue of Paddington Bear. So we're going to be talking about that. Social media users have been up in arms over the adaptation of Wuthering Heights because of a wedding dress which is thought to be of the wrong era and of the wrong design. Does it matter? This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We've got plenty of fine and settled weather in store across the UK this afternoon. Plenty of sunshine, but quite breezy down some North Sea coasts. At the moment, low pressure is starting to pull away to the east of the UK. That's allowing this ridge of high pressure to topple in from the west, bringing in some lighter winds and plenty of fine weather to the bulk of the UK too. So looking at things in more detail for the rest of today, we've got some patchy cloud towards the far north and northeast of the UK, bringing in an isolated shower. But for the bulk of the UK, it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around, and temperatures doing quite well in the sunshine, particularly across England and Wales, reaching the mid, locally upper teens in Celsius during the afternoon, up to 16 or 17 Celsius down towards the southeast, but feeling cooler down those North Sea coasts with that brisk north to northwesterly winds. So to end the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the north of the UK, some patchy cloud across the east and southeast of Scotland, with the best of the sunshine here towards the north and west of the country. Quite a bit of sunshine too across Northern Ireland, with some patchy cloud out across some western spots. But as we run into England and Wales, it's here we'll see the best of the evening sunshine, almost wall-to-wall sunshine here. And at this stage, temperatures holding up quite well at 14 or 15 Celsius in some spots, so fairly mild here to end the day. As we go into the evening then, the cloud will tend to melt away, certainly across those northern and eastern spots of the UK. Plenty of clear weather then developing into the early hours of Monday. But notice up towards the north and northwest here, we'll see thickening cloud and a bit of a breeze developing too, bringing some patchy rain in across the far north and west of Scotland and locally in across some western parts of Northern Ireland. A touch of frost in the south. Temperatures could get down to -2 to -4 Celsius here with a patchy frost, whereas towards the northwest there staying milder with that cloud breeze and a bit of patchy rain too. So into Monday then, we hold on to cloud towards the far north and northwest of the UK, bringing further bits of patchy rain at times. But for the bulk of the UK, it's set fair. Plenty of sunshine around. The best of the sunshine across England and Wales. Pretty much wall-to-wall sunshine here. And those temperatures doing pretty well too in the south, especially up to 16 or 17 Celsius, perhaps 18 towards the far northeast locally.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but 2 sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys Tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Poet Thomas Nash once wrote, "Spring, the sweet spring, is the year's pleasant king." As the sun shines and petals dance in the wind, you're most welcome to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo, a discussion of ethics, current affairs, politics and film. The University of Sussex has been heavily fined for failing to protect the right to free speech of its Professor of Philosophy, Kathleen Stock. She thinks that it will take many years to rid public institutions of intolerant ideologies. My panel will return to discuss. United States Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to Greenland has certainly raised the political temperature in that icy region as he hit out at Denmark. Cool-headed United States journalist Hadley Gamble will join me to discuss. This week, 2 RAF engineers were sentenced to a 12-month community order for damaging and stealing the Paddington Bear statue in Newbury. The sentencing remarks made by the district judge caught the attention of Sebastian Milbank, and he'll join me. And photographs from the set of Emerald Fennell's adaptation of Wuthering Heights have sparked debate on whether historical accuracy in film is important or necessary. 2 film critics will join me to discuss that. But before all, your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Prince Harry has been accused of harassment and bullying by the chair of the charity he set up in Princess Diana's honour. Dr. Sophie Chenkowda has claimed the Duke of trying to sabotage the organisation before quitting earlier this week. She told reporters he wanted to eject her of the charity he founded in honour of his late mother through bullying and harassment. In response, we've heard from a source close to Prince Harry and also other trustees who left Centre bail in solidarity this week. They said they fully expected this publicity stunt from the doctor. They remain firm in their resignation and look forward to the adjudication of the truth. Elsewhere, the government will introduce tough new laws to clamp down on illegal working. The Home Secretary says employers need to take action that prevents the illegal working in the first place. Companies hiring people in the gig economy will now be legally required to carry out checks confirming that anyone working in their name is eligible to work in the UK, bringing them in line with other employers. The term gig economy usually refers to short-term jobs, the most common examples including food delivery drivers and construction workers. That's all ahead of the government's first international summit on people smuggling gangs, which begins tomorrow. Security Minister Dan Jarvis says the UK is showing leadership in tackling the issue.
For 6 years, the previous government allowed the criminal networks that smuggle people into this country to largely get away with it. We are tackling their activities by working very closely with our neighbours internationally. And that's why we are hosting the summit in London over the next couple of days, because this is a truly international challenge and the solution will have to be truly international as well. It will involve us, as we are, working very closely with the French, but with a range of other partners along the supply networks that people are trafficked along. So this is the UK showing real leadership in terms of bringing more than 40 countries from around the world together to look at what more we can do to tackle this pernicious activity.
In other news, the UK government has pledged up to £10 million in life-saving aid to Myanmar after a deadly earthquake claimed more than 1,000 lives. The UN's warning a severe shortage of medical supplies is hampering the response to the quake. As the search for survivors continues, 139 people are reportedly missing across the country. Over 1,600 people were killed, thousands more injured following that 7.7 magnitude earthquake. The tremors caused destruction as far away as Thailand and China. Hundreds are believed to still be trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings. Fresh tremors are complicating those rescue efforts. In Bangkok, a 12th body was recovered late last night from a site of a collapsed high-rise in Myanmar. A woman was recovered alive after being trapped under that rubble for 30 hours. In other news, former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says he forgives serial abuser John Smith as he repeated an apology to victims and told of the deep sense of personal failure he feels about the handling of allegations. The former most senior bishop in the Church of England, who resigned in November and stepped down officially in January, said he'd not really thought it through enough when he initially declined to quit last year. The Macon report into John Smith concluded Mr Welby did not adequately follow up on reports about the Christian camp leader and barrister. It said Smith might have been brought to justice had Mr Welby formally reported allegations to police in 2013. Mr Welby initially said he would not resign over the report and remained in post for a further 5 days before announcing he would quit. And the Princess of Wales says nature has been her family's sanctuary over the past year in a special message for Mother's Day. A video posted alongside her message mainly features footage of different natural environments across the UK, as well as some shots of her hand touching a tree and of Prince William walking dogs in Norfolk last summer. Princess Catherine wrote, "Over the past year, nature has been our sanctuary. This Mother's Day, let us celebrate Mother Nature and recognise how our bond with the natural world can help not only nurture our inner selves, but remind us too of the role we play within the rich tapestry of life." And those are the latest headlines. For now, more news from me in half an hour.
Thank you very much, Tatiana Sanchez. In October 2021, Professor Kathleen Stock resigned from the University of Sussex. This came after a student campaign that called for her dismissal and after the university trade union accused the university of institutional transphobia. Now, Sussex has been fined more than £500,000 for failing to uphold her academic freedom. Kathleen Stock believes that the cancel culture is deeply ingrained in public institutions. My panel rejoins me now to discuss how we have arrived at a position where a person can be cancelled for refusing to accept that gender identity is more important than sex. Welcome back then to journalist and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. Candice, my question, how did we arrive at that situation?
There's so many interlocking trends that went on. I think there was the sort of the stultifying effects of social media, because I think a lot of these debates took place online and people had to be very careful what they said, so as not to, for instance, fall afoul of the algorithm, so then they stifled their speech. And then I think a lot of that sort of bled out into the institutions where you would think that people would have free speech, such as the universities. And I think that all these places where ideas are formed came together and became very, very, very conformist. And maybe you did have a few free radicals floating around in the system, but they were severely punished for saying what they believed to be true. They were the new heretics. They really were. For some of them, as we discussed before, it made them a lot tougher and it made them a lot harder, and they had a lot of solidarity with each other. But I think it was a very lonely place to be, especially for someone like Kathleen Stock. And I think now that she's sort of recognised as someone whose free speech should have been upheld, but for a long time it was a lonely fight and a hard fight, and you really suffered for it economically.
Fraser, Kathleen Stock is rather more specific. She talks about the role that Stonewall has played in this. Stonewall has been brought in by many institutions to conduct education programmes so that, so they can broaden the outlook of their employees, but also seems to have been responsible for implanting an ideology.
Yes, that's right. So Stonewall often advises on what kind of equality policies various bodies, workplaces should have. And often they advise people what they would like the law to be rather than what it is. And they will advise... so, for instance, as a result of this, the trans and non-binary policy at Sussex eventually ended up saying that there should be no transphobic propaganda, which essentially amounts to you shouldn't believe in biological sex, and even said that all course materials should have positive representations of transgender identity. Now, that's obviously going to pose problems for academic freedom, and especially for someone like Kathleen Stock, who is a gender-critical feminist who's raising questions about biological males in women's prisons or young children being medically transitioned, things like that. So clearly, I think what's fascinating about this story is actually, when we talk about campus censorship, we often think about, kind of blue-haired students screaming, but actually it's the institutions are just as bad. The adults who are supposed to be in the room, the university bureaucrats, are as much of a menace to free speech as the students are.
Skylar McGrath, you're from the left on politics. Does that suggest that you have a different view about this matter or not?
Yeah, so I do think that the problem with Kathleen Stock is that she actually says that it's fictional to believe in transgender. And I find that really, really depressing. I mean, back in 1971, John Morris was a very well-known journalist on the Sunday Times and transitioned to become Jan Morris. He was was accepted by everybody. And you know, this was decades and decades ago. And the Sunday Times welcomed it. There was lots of really good... We understood that people could transition.
I'm not an expert on Jan Morris or indeed on April Ashley, but my feeling is that these people went through extraordinary medical processes to arrive at a new gender.
Yes, but
it wasn't a matter of people self-declaring, for example.
No, what I'm saying is that actually, so then there becomes a spectrum. But what I find depressing is that Kathleen Stock says it's fictional to believe that you can change gender, when actually I think we have to accept that there are people who are unhappy in gender. Then there are a lot of debates to be had, right? Then we can have a debate about trans women in sport. Then we can have a debate about women-only places. But I think if you begin, and I think what we have to remember about what happened to her is actually she was supported by her union, but the union said, we don't agree with you. We agree that you shouldn't be victimised. We just happen to disagree with what you're saying. And she said, well, then that's not good enough.
But I think you said you were disappointed that she began in that way. But if you are disappointed, does that mean that she shouldn't be allowed to say it, that she should be cancelled for saying it?
Well, she wasn't. I mean, the students...
No, but are you clear that she shouldn't be? Even if you're disappointed by it, and even if someone is offended by it, are you clear that she shouldn't be cancelled for it?
Well, I think, you know, it's just like in Bristol, you have a man who denies the Holocaust at Bristol University.
Just like that?
Well, I mean, he's allowed to deny the Holocaust. That's his view, right? I think to say that transgender is fictional when we know that it's not, right? That for decades we've accepted that a very, very tiny proportion of people, this is and they're very, I mean, they have a terrible, terrible time, and then we're saying that you don't exist. And I think, and I don't believe in cancellation actually, but I do think that it wasn't the university that cancelled her, right? It was the students who the students were demonstrating against her. It must have been horrendous for her, right? But actually, I do think what she said was deeply, deeply offensive.
Do we always have to take that affirmative view, though? I mean, you mentioned Jan Morris, for instance, but it's come out that actually for Jan Morris's children and Jan Morris's wife, it was actually very difficult because the whole of society was telling Jan Morris, you are so brave, and everyone was supporting the decision that Jan Morris made. But for the children and the wife, especially the daughter, who still wanted to refer to him as her father, she felt she had no voice. And I do think that feminists that have come along, like Kathleen Stock, for instance, are trying to give voice to those people, to be able to say, listen, you know, like, I believe that biological reality is paramount.
Fraser, I don't want to pick on Scarlett, but what was your reaction to what Scarlett said, particularly when she got to Holocaust denial?
Well, I mean, it's actually an interesting comparison because, you know, often when we were talking about campus censorship in the past, there was a campaign called No Platform for Fascism. Now we've ended up with No Platform for Feminism. So it shows that if you give in to the idea that some speech should be censored, extreme speech like Holocaust denial, no one agrees with Holocaust denial, but it should be allowed. If you accept the idea that some speech should be censored, then you end up narrowing, the scope for debate, and you end up with someone like Kathleen Stock, who's actually, I think she's a bit more strident now, but at the time when she was at university, she was making quite measured comments about this issue. You know, she's a philosophy professor, not a, right-wing tabloid columnist. You know, she was making measured, sensible critiques of gender ideology, and yet was still treated as a pariah, still treated as someone who had to be scrubbed from the face of the earth, as a threat, to the student body and to their mental health. I mean, the scope for what we can say is so limited now.
Scott McGuire, a brief last answer. With the fine that's been imposed, do we suppose that a journey has begun from, as it were, the bottom of a pit? Are we climbing out of it?
Yes, but the problem with free speech is it means you're giving free speech to people like the Holocaust denier in Bristol, who is at the university. And if you believe in complete free speech, then that's fine. But you have to understand that brings that there's a problem with hate speech as well. And the reason actually that Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, wanted to look at this whole section is what she didn't want was lots of lawyers. She wanted free speech in universities without that whole thing of, because this will go on and on. Sussex, they're going to complain about it.
As I recall, John Stuart Mill said something like, "If all the world think one thing and one person think another, that person should still be allowed to voice that opinion, partly because it is his right, but partly because the entire world might be wrong and that one person might be right."
All I'm saying is I'm trying to say what she really said rather than she just, was a sweet little thing is that actually some people, if you're a trans person, what she said was deeply offensive.
We've got it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, panel, for your 2 sessions. Candice Holsworth, Scarlett Maguire and Fraser Myers. A spokesman for the University of Sussex said, "Universities must be able to have policies and expectations of behaviour that support respectful communication and enable us to manage cultural tensions on campus. Under this ruling, we believe that universities would not be permitted to expect their staff and students to treat each other with civility and respect." The Office for Students is effectively decreeing libertarian free speech absolutism as the fundamental principle for UK universities. In our view, the OFS is perpetuating the culture wars. So that was a fairly combative reply. Coming up, the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, has been ruffling feathers in Greenland in the same week that a US signal group chat was leaked. I'll discuss that with journalist Hadley Gamble next. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail. White glamour model Martina Big, 36, who, quote, identifies as black, quote, after having tanning... I can't do it. Who identifies as black, quote, after having tanning injections, and this is the kicker at the end of it, announces plan to move to Africa. Yeah. There's so much to unpack here. This is a woman called Martina Big, who is well-named.
That's her birth name.
That is her birth name, but also the description of her chest. She's spent quite a lot of money getting the largest breasts in Europe. She now, however, has been injecting herself with some kind of pigment or colouring system to turn her from white to black.
Let's have a look. So this is before.
This is before, and then it's quite a shocking shift here. She's been to Kenya to go and meet the Masai Mara. They've christened her. They've given her a baptism, and so she's now believing that she is Kenyan, and she's going over to Kenya. So what is weird about this is it's like, obviously the...
Tell us what's weird about it.
What is weird about it? There's obviously the initial thought of like, that's really inappropriate. This is black-facing, but not even in a temporary way. Yeah. But then hang on, she wants to be living her true life. So maybe she should be. This is where it's all got tied up in itself. Steve used to be a black woman. This is Stephen Gage, our correspondent.
What's the difference in blackface here and what gender-critical women would call women face, which they would say that's how they address men, biological men, now saying that they're women. They would say it's the same, like Dylan Mulvaney, who is, as far as I know, still an intact male, but sort of prancing around and sort of being this kind of...
like a girl.
Yeah, like oh, I'm a girl and that's very offensive to women.
In fact, this woman actually has a greater claim because evolutionarily, she will have black ancestors.
Of course, we all do.
Yeah, so...
And, according to her, she will, and I'm not a doctor, but she will have black children.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At DB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christys Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christys Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. US Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to Greenland has certainly caused a storm. He was explicit in his criticism of Denmark, accusing it of under-investing in Greenland and warning of encroachment from Russia and China. His visit came after a security breach dominated the headlines this week, as journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was added to a group chat alongside the Vice President, the Defense Secretary and the United States National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz. Joining me now, live from Knoxville, Tennessee, is international journalist and TV presenter Hadley Gamble. Hello, Hadley, and thank you very much for joining me, which it must be pretty early on Sunday morning for you. So I'm very grateful to see you. Now, tell me about this encroachment into Greenland. Do you think that Russia and China are encroaching onto Greenland?
Absolutely, they are, Michael. And I think, as much as J.D. Vance seems to anger people with his remarks, more often than not, they're actually true, whether it be his comments in Munich at the security conference where I was president or these comments in Greenland yesterday. I mean, if you take a step back and look at this is a landmass, 56,000 people, that has been very poorly defended, not just by Greenland itself, obviously, but the government of Denmark. And you got to take a step back. Back in 2021, when I spoke to Vladimir Putin, they had just successfully launched ballistic missiles. And I asked Vladimir Putin, can I go and see your ballistic missiles? And he told me they were already on deployment in the Arctic. And that was back in 2021. The Russians have overwhelmingly more security, more military hardware, more intelligence hardware in the Arctic than the United States or NATO partners. And it's something, frankly, that NATO has really been on the back foot with over the last several years. And it's really just the Trump administration calling them out for this, calling out Denmark for this. And the reality is, America is not going to invade Greenland. I mean, again, 56,000 people. This is a place that, if you look at it with regards to the UK, they're about the size of Barrow-in-Furness. I mean, the reality is that the West, that NATO, are very poorly defended. Denmark hasn't done anything to remedy that. And the best case scenario is either Denmark steps up, which they have signaled that they may possibly do, and takes care of this, or what was more likely is the United States is just going to have to increase their presence. Existing bases, they're going to get more access, frankly, to the island's resources by stealth.
Just one point along the way is that here the administration is talking about encroachment by China, which is a familiar theme, but also by Russia. And some of us in Europe may be slightly surprised by that, because we have got the feeling now that Donald Trump is very relaxed about the massive encroachment by Russia into Ukraine. So what exactly is the Trump attitude to Russia? I'm a bit confused now.
I think everyone's slightly confused by this, but if you take a step back and listen and think about what he said on the campaign trail, it was all about finding a way to get to peace. Peace at any price is the question that most people in Europe are raising at this point. Is that what is exactly happening at these conversations in Riyadh between the United States and their counterparts from Russia? But frankly, this is a president who sees China as the greater threat. And he has repeatedly said he wants to get peace with Russia and Ukraine, peace with Gaza and Israel. And fortunately, the way he seems to be getting to those end games is not something that's very palatable to U.S. partners.
Let's go back to the encroachment in Greenland. What exactly is the charge? Is it that Chinese and Russian facilities or agents or people are already on the landmass of Greenland? Or is it that they're in the waters close by? Or is it that they're on the Arctic ice close by? What exactly is it? And whatever it is, what chance would Denmark have of defending against it?
I think there is a significant chance that the United States, after these accusations, which are well-founded, considering we know that there is Russian hardware in the Arctic, we know that there are Russian patrols in Arctic waters, we know that that area of the world is less than secure. If you're sitting in NATO headquarters in Brussels, or if you're sitting in Washington, sitting in Paris, sitting in London, that's something that should have been on the radar years ago, but other things supposedly have been taking the place of that. Other focuses, whether they be the green agenda or others, unfortunately have dominated that agenda. It's a story that I covered during my 15 years at CNBC repeatedly, and very, very difficult to get airtime for it, by the way. But it's something that the Trump administration is very keen to take care of. One of the questions, of course, going forward is who is going to take care of it at a time when there are questions about America's role in NATO and whether or not that's going to continue in the same way that it has before. But by putting this on the agenda, Donald Trump, once again, making something that the United States, at least, feels is very important front and center. It's exactly what he did during his first administration when he told NATO, this is insane. Why are we funding both European defense? And at the same time, allowing you or encouraging you to continue to take cheap Russian gas. It makes absolutely no sense, and it makes you vulnerable. So going forward, whether Denmark steps up or this is a NATO-led endeavor, this is something Mark Rutte certainly is very much aware of. And when I've sat at NATO in Brussels, it's something that's been on the agenda. It's been talked about, but there have been so many other things really taking precedence, particularly the Russia-Ukraine conflict, obviously, that it hasn't really been delved into. So I think this is just the Trump administration once again pushing this to the front of the agenda.
I want to gauge the scale of the threat as to whether it's something that Denmark, if it stepped up, Denmark, if it made an effort, actually could deal with, or if really what J.D. Vance is saying is there's a massive threat here and only the United States can deal with it. Can you help me to understand the scale of it?
I think it's a big threat. At the end of the day, this is something that, whether or not Denmark can take care of it on its own is a bigger question. But, we'd have to look at the scale of Denmark's GDP and their ability to put people on the ground. One of the things that the Trump administration has floated behind the scenes, of course, has been some kind of partnership with Denmark, some kind of move within NATO to take care of this threat. When you take a step back and think about this, this is a long-term conversation. This is something that I was covering back in 2021. This has taken decades for the Russians to take so much military hardware, so much intelligence hardware up into this, into the Arctic Circle, essentially. And this is something that isn't just going to go away. So this isn't an effort that in a year we can say that Denmark has done its duty and figured out how to make this less of a threat.
Just very briefly, a reflection from you, given your experience as a journalist. The language that was revealed being used between members of the administration in the leak from the group chat struck me, because I had a long time in public life, as being rather childish and flippant and frivolous. It did not seem to me to be at the level or standard that I would expect from national and international decision makers. What was your reaction?
Could anybody be surprised? I mean, this is a man that has surrounded himself this time around with absolute loyalists, and they're not necessarily the most professional people out there. And I think that this was a direct reflection of that. I mean, putting the chat like this on Signal in the first place, whether there was, information of great sensitivity or not, as you say, it sounded rather flippant. But at the end of the day, when we talk about the Signal conversation, post this event, everyone in the Trump administration has been on message. And it's fascinating to watch, frankly, as a journalist, just how on message they've managed to stay. And this was, as you know, a total gift to the Democrats. And it's something that, unfortunately, it says everything about the state of the party, the state of the leadership of that party, that they've been able to use it or even to articulate really what the problem is. Because at the end of the day, as the American people very well know, unfortunately, the Biden administration failed to keep freedom of navigation, freedom of the seas. And this is an administration that in their early days decided they couldn't even be brought to call the Houthis terrorists. So it's one of those situations where with the American people, and at least with regards to the polling, as flagrant as this has been in terms of not as an abuse of power, but just as an exhibition of stupidity, the American people are still backing the Trump team.
Very interesting reflections. Thank you very much indeed, Hadley Gamble. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Now, it's your final week to see how to win our massive spring giveaway and grab a designer handbag, designer watches and an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Make sure you don't miss your chance to make it all yours. Here are the details that you need.
It's the final week to see how you could spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, We'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag and not one, but two sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up after the news, 2 RAF engineers were sentenced this week after damaging and stealing a statue of Paddington Bear. The district judge's sentencing remarks have caused controversy. I'll be exploring them with Sebastian Milbank. But first, your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you. Prince Harry has been accused of harassment and bullying by the chair of the charity he set up in Princess Diana's honour. Dr Sophie Chincauda has claimed the Duke of trying to sabotage the organisation before quitting earlier this week. She told reporters he wanted to eject her of the charity he founded in honour of his late mother through the bullying and harassment. In response, we've heard from a source close to Prince Harry and other trustees who left the charity Centre Barley in solidarity this week. They said they fully expected this publicity stunt from the doctor. They remain firm in their resignation and look forward to the adjudication of the truth. Elsewhere, the government will introduce tough new laws to clamp down on illegal working. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says employers need to take action that prevents the illegal working in the first place. Companies hiring people in the gig economy will now be legally required to carry out checks confirming that anyone working in their name is eligible to work in the UK, bringing them in line with other employers. The term gig economy usually refers to short-term jobs, the most common examples being food delivery drivers and construction workers. Well, that's all ahead of the government's first international summit on people smuggling gangs, which begins tomorrow in London. And the Princess of Wales says nature's been her family's sanctuary over the past year in a special message for Mother's Day. A video posted alongside her message mainly features footage of different natural environments across the UK, as well as some shots of her hand touching a tree and of Prince William walking dogs in Norfolk last summer. Princess Catherine wrote, "Over the past year, nature has been our sanctuary. This Mother's Day, let us celebrate Mother Nature and recognise how our bond with the natural world can help not only nurture our inner selves, but remind us too of the role that we play within the rich tapestry of life." And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dewberry and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Anna, let's have a look at this. And how do we tackle the work of one of Britain's most infamous white supremacists?
Yes.
William Shakespeare.
Oh no. That William Shakespeare. Yes.
Why is he being? Why are some people saying he's a white supremacist?
So this seems to mostly be based on some research that was carried out in 2022 by some academics that concluded that essentially promoting Shakespeare, as they said, benefits the ideology of white European supremacy, because the argument is that effectively you're saying that this kind of culture is superior to others. But, you know, I'm afraid most people who read Shakespeare will conclude that it is superior to most things that are written. And that's nothing to do with him being white. That's just to do with him being a genius. And it's very depressing seeing this, but also the amount of time, effort and presumably funding is spent on these sort of projects. It actually, I think, does a disservice to the youth, to young people, because by effectively erasing or trying to rewrite history, they then don't actually learn about the struggles people have gone through. So it's a bizarre one.
But I find it astonishing, because this is Birmingham University that's done this study, or an academic from Birmingham University. Birmingham should be celebrating everything great about the Midlands. It should be biased. If Birmingham and Stratford itself cannot celebrate what makes Stratford and Birmingham great, because celebrating a successful British writer from centuries ago reduces the visibility of writers from other countries that had nothing to do with us in the first place.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. This week, 2 Royal Air Force engineers were sentenced to 12-month community orders for damaging and stealing the Paddington Bear statue in Newbury. On sentencing, District Judge Sam Guzzi said that the actions of Daniel Heath and William Lawrence were the antithesis of everything that Paddington stands for, and that Paddington represents kindness, tolerance, and promotes integration and acceptance in our society. I welcome Sebastian Milbank, the Associate Editor of The Critic magazine, for his reaction. So, the judge was speaking for us all, surely.
Well, I mean, I was transported back to the 12th century. A couple of village youths, you know, sort of men-at-arms, you know, on the lash, had torn down a statue of the Virgin Mary, you know, which we sentenced to hard labour.
No, you must have misread that. It was Sebastian... it was Paddington Bear.
Oh, well, I mean, it's St Paddington, the blessed Paddington.
So you took exception to the judge's remarks. You thought he was sanctifying or even deifying Paddington Bear.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's this idea that he's some kind of embodiment of British values. What a boring idea. That sort of, you know, that there's a set of British values that we all have to sign up for. It's not, you know, if Paddington Bear's anything, he's a reflection of the British character, not British values.
In what sense, the British character?
Well, so I mean, I thought it was rather ironic that we're having these sort of young men, you know, sent down for misbehaving and we're invoking Paddington Bear. I mean, Paddington Bear's always getting in trouble. He hasn't been in prison. You know, I mean, it's obviously what they did was, you know, very yobbish and antisocial. But there was something quite British about it too. You know, it's a couple of RAF engineers that had too many beers. They saw, let's be honest, a pretty tacky fiberglass statue of Paddington Bear and thought they'd run off with it.
Are we missing religion? I mean, are you happy that religion has sort of moved on from public affairs in the way that it has? Or are you saying that instead of invoking the spirit of Paddington Bear, the judge should have been invoking Christian values, for example?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? I mean, if you don't believe in God, you'll believe in anything. It does sometimes seem like that, so that we've got this sort of strange secular folk religion that's very sentimental, often quite irrational. You know, we saw it on the death of Princess Diana. You know, this sort of... It's very sentimental. It's very much sort of... It focuses on these sort of lovable, sort of almost harmless characters. It's sort of Joanna Lumleyism.
You're attacking national treasureism.
It's national treasureism.
Because I have aspirations of my own.
You're well on your way, I think.
And then, in your article, you made some reflections about Paddington Bear himself. I mean, you even questioned his immigration status?
Well, OK. I mean, if we're going to take Paddington seriously, if we're going to act as if it's a real person, let's ask the question. I mean, he turns up in middle of Paddington Station. He says he's from darkest Peru, but he hasn't got a passport, hasn't got a visa. He just starts living with this, West London couple.
So you're implying there, I think, and this is a very serious charge, that Paddington Bear may have destroyed his documentation.
Well, I mean, he doesn't have a birth certificate. I mean, maybe it all burnt down in darkest Peru. It's very convenient. And how did he get in the country? It's a small boat.
Do we know what age Paddington Bear was on arrival?
Well, this is another question. So, is he a child? I mean, he seems, there's reference to having lived with an aunt. He goes to school at one point, but he's also working as a window cleaner. What's going on there? Refugees are not supposed to work.
And presumably bears age differently from us, do they? Have you? I'm sure you've studied this.
Well, this is the thing. So the spectacled bear, which is native to Latin America and likes to eat fruit from the rainforest floor, generally reaches sexual maturity around the ages of 4 to 7.
Right.
And the Paddington Bear books span years. So this may be an adult bear.
Later on, we're going to be talking about Wuthering Heights. And in conversation with me a moment ago, you made a connection, which may not be obvious to everyone, between Paddington Bear and Wuthering Heights. But would you like to share that with our viewers?
Well, yes. I mean, so, we have this sort of horrible kind of dry religion of, secular British values. And it's all about sort of tolerance and acceptance and respect. Whereas I think there's something in the British character that we see, I mean, being serious here for a moment, about Paddington Bear, that he's sort of an anarchist. And he's an anarchist because he loves order, and that kind of means that he creates disorder. And I think that's something very British about that. And you see that in Wuthering Heights as well, that there's this love of wildness, of there's an orderly existence, but it's covering this kind of inner sort of love of kind of freedom and anarchy. And I think this magistrate-sization of Paddington is this attempt to kind of tame the British spirit into a set of secular civic nationalist values. It's very unnatural, it's very un-British.
Extraordinary to reflect that Paddington Bear took marmalade sandwiches with Her Majesty the Queen. It just shows that an immigrant can get to the top.
In a very British way.
Thank you very much, indeed, Sebastian Milberg. Coming up, photographs taken on the set of Emerald Fennell's adaptation of Wuthering Heights have caused controversy this week. I'll be exploring whether historical accuracy in films is important next. But first, if you're in search of some sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We continue to stay unsettled across central and eastern parts of the Mediterranean with further heavy showers and thunderstorms, some localised flooding possible. Through Monday, we can see across much of Greece into Italy those heavy downpours continuing, some brisk winds, feeling quite cold too, but drier further west into Spain and Portugal, sunny spells before heading over to Madeira where there'll be some showers here, and largely dry across the Canary Islands. Over the next few days, it stays fairly similar, temperatures in the sunshine reaching the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We've got plenty of fine and settled weather in store across the UK this afternoon, plenty of sunshine but quite breezy down some North Sea coasts. At the moment, low pressure is starting to pull away to the east of the UK. That's allowing this ridge of high pressure to topple in from the west, bringing in some lighter winds and plenty of fine weather to the bulk of the UK too. So looking at things in more detail for the rest of today, we've got some patchy cloud towards the far north and northeast of the UK, bringing in an isolated shower. But for the bulk of the UK, it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around, and temperatures doing quite well in the sunshine, particularly across England and Wales, reaching the mid, locally upper teens in Celsius during the afternoon, up to 16 or 17 Celsius down towards the southeast, but feeling cooler down those North Sea coasts with that brisk north to northwesterly winds. So to end the day, there'll be plenty of sunshine across the north of the UK, some patchy cloud across the east and southeast of Scotland, with the best of the sunshine here towards the north and west of the country. Quite a bit of sunshine too across Northern Ireland, with some patchy cloud out across some western spots. But as we run into England and Wales, it's here we'll see the best of the evening sunshine, almost wall-to-wall sunshine here. And at this stage, temperatures holding up quite well at 14 or 15 Celsius in some spots, so fairly mild here to end the day. As we go into the evening then, the cloud will tend to melt away, certainly across those northern and eastern spots of the UK. Plenty of clear weather then developing into the early hours of Monday. But notice up towards the north and northwest here, we'll see thickening cloud and a bit of a breeze developing too, bringing some patchy rain in across the far north and west of Scotland and locally in across some western parts of Northern Ireland. A touch of frost in the south. Temperatures could get down to -2 to -4 Celsius here with a patchy frost, whereas towards the northwest there staying milder with that cloud breeze and a bit of patchy rain too. So into Monday then, we hold on to cloud towards the far north and northwest of the UK, bringing further bits of patchy rain at times. But for the bulk of the UK, it's set fair. Plenty of sunshine around. The best of the sunshine across England and Wales. Pretty much wall-to-wall sunshine here. And those temperatures doing pretty well too in the south, especially up to 16 or 17 Celsius, perhaps 18 towards the far northeast locally.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Literature and history enthusiasts have been up in arms this week after images from the set of Emerald Fennell's new adaptation of Wuthering Heights were released. The photos show lead actress Margot Robbie playing Emily Bronte's Catherine Earnshaw in a white wedding dress. As social media users were quick to point out, the custom of wearing white generally emerged in the mid-19th century, led by Queen Victoria when she married Prince Albert. Now, Bronte's novel, although published in 1847, is set in the late 18th century. Is historical accuracy important in film adaptations? Is it enough to make a film beautiful and its scenes readily intelligible, even while compromising on detail? Joining me now are the hosts of the Performance Anxiety podcast, Maren Tom and Alex Dale. Welcome to you both.
How do you do?
Now, let's get your general positions first. Maren, are you worried about this wedding dress in Wuthering Heights?
Oh, no. I'm actually looking forward to this movie very much. I'm a big fan of Emerald Fennell's films, especially the film Saltburn, I liked very much. So I'm very curious about what she does with Wuthering Heights.
Actually, I was doing a bit of research just now, just on the internet, and it seemed actually the position was slightly more complicated than I'd been led to believe. I think people pre-Victorian age were wearing all sorts of colours on their wedding day, and very often not even having, as it were, a wedding dress. They had a dress which they wore to their wedding, if you see the difference.
Yes.
But I do suspect that the neckline is pretty low for the period in question.
Well, I think historical adaptations always tell you much more about now than they do about history. Yeah. I think that's very important to say up front. So I think what's interesting is what are the choices being made and what do they tell us about contemporary preoccupations? What is Emerald Fennell thinking when she chooses I'm sure there's historians to tell her in her own crew that this might be an anachronistic dress, but she's made a choice anyway. Yes.
Yeah, well, I said that a moment ago. You want to make the film intelligible. So had she worn brown or had she worn yellow, the viewer might think, oh, what on earth's going on here? Is she unhappy about her marriage? Does she feel that she's been sinful before her marriage? No, it would have had none of those implications. Yes. It's simply that in that century they wore a different colour. So would that be a defence do you think?
Well, I think, if you look at this dress, to me, it reminded me very much of Lady Diana's wedding dress. So, I'm sure it was a very deliberate choice to evoke this sentiment in the cultural memory of Lady Diana. So this kind of very, very long trail and this big white dress with puffy sleeves. And so that means something. So Emerald Fennell is making a comment about our reimagination or this kind of what a beautiful dream-like wedding is.
Right. Now, this is not strictly a historical or non-historical point, but Catherine Earnshaw in the novel marries when she's 18.
Yes.
And Margot Robbie is not 18.
No,
Does that matter to you?
To me personally, no, it doesn't. I think what it means is definitely means something for the film, for sure. So one of the things that we like to talk about is the idea that casting in itself is part of the storytelling. You pick an actor, not necessarily because of their kind of superficial qualities, such as their age or even their hair colour, but because they stand for something and they represent something. So Margot Robbie, who is also a producer on this film, so she might have had something to say about who gets to play Catherine, but they've chosen Margot Robbie because of specific qualities that she has, that only she has, that help embody a contemporary take on what Catherine Earnshaw could be.
OK, let's get to things that do matter. Are you bothered in general about historical accuracy in films?
No, I'm not, because films are there to be explored by artists. Artists are generally should be free to explore them ideas artistically, and that often means not telling the truth. To tamper with ideas and create a new ideas.
Yes.
And the imagination that films should be historically accurate is putting a burden on them that they probably can't fulfill.
I understand that argument, but I think in particular of historical biographical films, I mean, many people will have derived their views of Richard Nixon from the film.
Yes.
Perhaps it matters less, but they'll have derived their ideas of Napoleon from movies that have been made about Napoleon. I mean, is that just?
It's a very good question, and it's a very difficult question. So I think the way to approach it, I always think, is that art is a lie that tells the truth. Excuse me. So there is such a thing as artistic license. And I think a lot of the time film has to show things in a particular way that something like a book or a biography can't. So
yeah, I understand that too, but I think there can also be lies that tell lies. I mean, particularly when we're dealing with quite recent history, you can have very politically motivated producers. And, to convince you or me of a particular view of Richard Nixon because it fits in with your view of politics, I mean, does that not cross a line for you? Does that not bother you?
I think people are justifiably wary of historical interpretations because, we live in a climate where, every doorknob that's older than 50 years has to be decolonized. This is the cultural climate in which how we see history, how we treat cultural icons. And people are quite rightfully suspicious that any new adaptation, a new interpretation of something as important to British culture as Wuthering Heights also will retell the story in a way that re-educates them, tells them what to think about their own identity and their own Britishness. So I understand that people are really, really strict with culture because other institutions are not doing their job of defending British culture and British history.
Alex, very briefly, I mean, Wuthering Heights is the most amazing story. Are you looking forward to seeing this new interpretation? I absolutely am, yes. I loved Saltburn. I think it was a fantastic, bizarre film. It divided a lot of people. I think this will be equally imaginative. That is interesting. I absolutely love Saltburn too, so let's hope we're in for a treat. But we certainly will be looking out very carefully for that wedding dress. Thank you very much, Alex and Maren. Thanks to all my guests for joining me today. I hope that in what seem like crazy times, our conversations have been level-headed and enlightening. Please do stay tuned, because coming up next is Andrew Pearce with The Weekend. And Andrew, tell us, please, what's coming up on your show.
Michael, thank you very much. Lots coming up on the show. I'm in for Dawn Newsom, of course. We're talking about the Labour MP who's charging you for looking after his dog. It's Mother's Day, of course. Why are so few people now willing to adopt? far too many children in care. We're also talking about the Labour MP in Birmingham, where there's a huge bin strike, been going on for the best part of 3 weeks. Don't worry, his big priority, why there should be a new airport in Kashmir. I would say that's the case of walk priorities. And the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Have we heard this before? She's launching a crackdown on illegal workers. They're targeting things like car washes. I think we've heard this all before, but the best of luck to her on that. And if it's Mother's Day, have they sport you? And also, did you remember to put the clocks forward? We're debating why we're putting the clocks forward in the first place. I'm Andrew Pearce, here on GB News, but first, here's your weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We've got plenty of fine and settled weather in store across the UK over the coming few days, although we'll start to see a bit of a cooling breeze developing too. Low pressure is starting to pull away to the east of the UK at the moment. That's allowing a high pressure ridge to build in from the west, and that will promise to quieten things down as we go into the coming few days. So looking at things in more detail for the overnight period then, the cloud towards the north and east this evening will tend to melt away. We'll leave a fair bit of clear weather as we go into the early hours of Monday. Thickest cloud though developing towards the north and northwest of the UK, here turning quite breezy, and we can also see some patchy rain developing as we go into the early hours of Monday across the far north and northwest of Scotland. Turning quite frosty across rural parts of England and Wales. Could see temperatures down to -3, even -4 Celsius in one or two spots by the morning on Monday. The odd fog patch here too. But a milder picture towards the north and northwest of the UK, given the cloud, the breeze and that patchy rain. So we head into Monday then on a fairly cloudy note towards the north and west of Scotland here. Cloud thick enough to give some patchy rain. The best of the sunshine to start the day across the east and south east of the country. Fairly bright across Northern Ireland, although there will be some cloud floating around, perhaps thick enough to give the odd spot of rain in one or two spots. And certainly the best of the sunshine reserved for England and Wales. Early fog and frost soon lifting to leave plenty of sunshine. We hold on to fairly clear skies here for the bulk of the day on Monday. So lots of sunshine developing here as we go through Monday. Whereas towards the north and northwest, always more cloud around. Still thick enough, particularly towards the north and west of Scotland, to bring some patchy rain at times. Quite breezy across the northwest of the UK, lighter winds elsewhere. And temperatures in the sunshine doing quite well, up to 16 or 17 Celsius. Perhaps also peaking at around about 18 degrees across the Moray Firth. But generally speaking, a bit cooler towards the north and northwest of the UK. Going into the evening on Monday, cloud will tend to melt away across the north and northwest, so we end up with a fairly clear night on Monday night, turning quite frosty too. Lots of sunshine though as we go through the rest of the week. Notice those temperatures doing quite well too, into the mid to upper teens Celsius. A bit chilly though during the overnight period.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front.